So as I said, we're continuing to address issues and questions that I've received in the question box. And one of the questions that I received asked me to address the issue of abortion from the Bible's perspective. And it certainly is a hot topic nowadays. We believe, when I say we, I mean our church, our class, born-again Christians. We believe that life begins in the womb at the moment of conception. It's the only place in the whole universe where there is a new strand of DNA created that's not the mother's DNA, it's not the father's DNA, it's unique in the universe. And today we're going to talk about the sanctity of human life, and specifically the issue of abortion. And we know that it is an issue that divides our country in particular at this time, and has since 1973, when the Supreme Court back then handed down their decision in Roe versus Wade, saying that abortion on demand was the law of the land across the country. And now, nearly 50 years later, that has finally been reversed. People are not indifferent on this issue. It is rather hotly contested. And even bringing up the word in front of other people oftentimes creates all kinds of emotion. Both pro-life people and pro-choice people have strong emotions regarding it. And whenever the word abortion is mentioned, it seems to charge the atmosphere of the room with tension. And right now, there's plenty of elections that are becoming a referendum on the issue. Since Roe was overturned, the Democratic Party has sought to make abortion rights one of its primary campaign issues. Perhaps its only primary campaign issue. And to no one's surprise, I'm sure I stand decidedly pro-life. I believe that's where the Bible says. But because we have such a divide in this nation over the issue, I want to take this issue and examine it a little bit differently from two perspectives. I will most definitely be sharing the Bible's teaching regarding life and its value and when it begins. But I also want to share why the science of biology leads me to the conclusion of being a pro-life person. I want to share some scientific facts that lead me to believe that abortion involves the taking of a human life. Nearly all the facts that I'm going to share with you today have come from either a neutral or a pro-choice source, so that I can't be accused of bias. My purpose here, this is the Berean class, so named for the Christians in the biblical town of Berea, who were known for searching the scriptures to see if what they were being told was true. Well, there's a whole lot of rhetoric and argument coming from the pro-choice side that claims that an unborn child is not a child at all, that it's not a human life. So I want to equip our class to be able to speak intelligently on that subject and compassionately about abortion. I don't have a Republican agenda here as much as I have a Kingdom of God agenda. I want to talk about what is a highly sensitive topic for many people in a way as if I would be discussing it if I were sitting across the table from someone who's had an abortion. I want us to be able to present rational arguments for the pro-life position. Now, occasionally, since I've been home, I've had extended discussions on Facebook about abortion, homosexuality, and other hot topics like that. And though I'm always careful to defend the truth, I do it as kindly as possible. But the fact is, I often don't hear much from the people on the other side of the conversation after I've had that discussion. But we'll seek to be kind, but firm regarding the truth. And what it really comes down to, everything about abortion hinges on one question. Is the unborn a person? Are they a person? And And there's really only two choices concerning abortion. If the unborn are human, then abortion is the taking of a human life. If the unborn are not human, then you can do as you wish. So that's what we'll be addressing, starting with what you could call the facts of life. Maybe you've wondered how you could make a pro-life argument to someone who doesn't believe the Bible. You see, there's a belief in our culture that goes essentially like this. Pro-life beliefs are largely religious beliefs divorced from science. Now, nothing could be further from the truth, but most people don't know that. They think that the pro-life position is the religious position and the pro-choice position is the scientific position. Additionally, there are some who profess religion but say that their religious belief is that life begins at birth, not conception. Now, that perception doesn't come from the Bible, but that it may be their belief. So we're going to begin by discussing abortion from a scientific viewpoint to see, can I make a scientific argument for the protection of preborn life? So we're going to start with the embryological facts of life before birth. And embryology is the branch of biology and medicine concerned with the study of embryos and their development. So that's what we're going to be looking at. And maybe you've heard something like this before, but I'm just going to cover briefly for you the development of a human embryo. The fact is that medical science is not friendly to the pro-choice argument. Most of the facts I'm going to share with you came from either the Texas Department of Health or from the Mayo Clinic on the development of a human fetus. At 4 weeks, the Mayo Clinic tells us that the brain and the spinal cord begin to form. At 4 weeks, the heart begins to form. At 4 weeks, the stomach and intestines are forming. At 4 weeks, bone tissue is growing. At 4 weeks, the eyes and the ears are just beginning to form. At 4 weeks, that baby weighs less than an ounce and is about 1/8 of an inch long. I mean, tiny, tiny. At 8 weeks, brain activity can now be recorded. At 8 weeks, the baby has elbows and toes that are visible. At 8 weeks, their facial features, the eyes, the nose, the lips, the tongue are developing. At 8 weeks, that baby is about maybe 1 inch to 1.5 inches long at the most. At the end of 8 weeks, a pregnant woman is not even to the end of her first trimester. Most pregnant women at this point would still be throwing up, and their uterus would only be about the size of a lemon. Here's a quote from the Mayo Clinic. Measuring 1 1/4 inches from crown to rump and weighing about 1/13 of an ounce, a 56-day-old embryo is now all but fully formed. All body systems are in place and elaborated. Architecturally, the organism is more or less whole. Though the energy output is about 1/5 that of an adult, the heart is functionally complete, and a great passage has been made. At 12 weeks, at 12 weeks, the neck is present. The face is now well formed. At 12 weeks, the arms and the legs move. At 12 weeks, definitive signs of male and female gender have appeared. At 12 weeks, a heartbeat can be heard using electronic devices. At 12 weeks, a baby is about 2 to 3 inches in length. At 12 weeks, the preborn life starts to make his or her own movements. And it's about this time that a woman starts to show with her uterus being about the size of a grapefruit. At 16 weeks, swallowing and chest movements are clearly present. The baby's mouth makes sucking motions. The mother can begin to feel the baby move. The baby takes shape while the head and the body become proportional. The baby's eyes can blink, and the heart and blood vessels are fully formed. The baby's fingers and toes have fingerprints. The baby now measures about 4.3 to 4.6 inches and weighs about 3.5 ounces. At 20 weeks, the baby can suck his thumb, or hers, yawn, stretch, and make faces. Arms and legs begin to punch and kick, and the baby's taste buds are present. The baby weighs at this point about 10 ounces and is a little more than 6 inches long. So science tells us that the fetus has a heartbeat. Science tells us the fetus's kidneys are functioning. And science can monitor the brain waves of the fetus. Back in 1973, when Roe versus Wade was decided, you couldn't take a 3D sonogram, an ultrasound, and watch a baby suck his thumb. Now we know that by 8 weeks, babies have brain waves. They even dream, and they suck their thumb. At 8 weeks, all their organs are functioning. They have brain waves, a heartbeat, and their kidneys are functioning. The baby even has its own blood type, which is distinct from the mother's or the father's. And folks, all this says human life. Consider with me fetal homicide laws, laws against killing a fetus. In 2004, President George W. Bush signed into law a bill that made it a crime to kill or harm an unborn child during an assault of the mother. The law was popularly known as the Lacey and Connors Law because Lacey Peterson, if you remember Lacey Peterson, she was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared on Christmas Eve of 2002. The president said at the time of the bill signing, all who knew Lacey Peterson have mourned 2 deaths, and the law cannot look away and pretend there is just one. And even today, there are 38 states that have laws against harming an unborn child, including Illinois. And it leads to a crazy situation. It is illegal to take the life of an unborn child if the mother wants the baby, but it is legal to take his life, to take the life of the unborn if she does not in many states. That's what the law was under Roe versus Wade. So the law recognizes that there is life before birth. So those who argue for abortion are essentially saying that the woman's life is more important than the child's life, which is hard to fathom when you consider neonatal care, the care for newborns. Neonatal care is a specialized medical care for the tiniest of patients. And just recently I read about a premature baby born in West Texas. The nurses had to handbag the baby continually for the first 10 hours of life to help him breathe. They did this because the normal ventilation machines that they would use would have destroyed the soft tissue of his lungs. Preemie's lung tissue was like Kleenex at that point. So these nurses hand inflated his lungs to keep him alive around the clock for 10 hours straight. And what a dichotomy that is, that the medical profession goes to such lengths to save the life of a child, while other medical professionals perform procedures to end the life of an unborn child. I read something from a high-risk pregnancy specialist, Dr. Stephen Calvin of Minnesota. He wrote, "When I started medical school in 1976, babies born below 28 weeks were not resuscitated. They were not considered viable. Today, the lower limit of viability is 23 weeks. And he wrote in a letter some years ago to the Arizona Daily Star, he said, "There's an inescapable schizophrenia in aborting a perfectly normal 22-week fetus while at the same hospital performing intrauterine surgery on its cousin." And that's the situation when it comes to these preborn humans, is that they can be killed in one operating room while being saved in another. Consider these sonograms, because the progress of medical technology since Roe versus Wade was decided has been incredible. And modern day sonograms, you've seen these before, at least on TV, pictures of the ultrasounds of a child, and they can do it in real time and watch that child move and kick and suck his or her thumb. And it gives us an incredible insight into the mother's womb that we didn't used to have. Here's another quote from that high-risk pregnancy specialist, Dr. Calvin. In 1973, fetal ultrasound imaging technology was early in its development. The anatomic development and activities of the fetus were invisible. Today, the practice of obstetrics is much more effective because of our ability to obtain detailed views of the fetus inside the uterus. Current ultrasound imaging techniques reveal the marvelous complexity of prenatal growth and development. Just as parents of newborns mark their baby's developmental progress with milestones of activities, thanks to modern technology, we can see similar developmental milestones in unborn babies. So we have this conflict, this inescapable conflict in how modern American medical practice operates. An unborn baby is only saved when the mother wants the child, if they're living in a state that allows abortion, such as ours. An unborn child, then, is a child in the eyes of the law when her mother wants her. Yet, if she is not a child, if her mother doesn't want her, that presents to a mother the ability to decide whether or not that child is a child, whether or not it's human. That is insane. How can one unborn child at 5 months be in a hospital operating room being aborted when an unborn child of the same age is undergoing life-saving surgery the next room over? It is the height of human hypocrisy and of human selfishness. So consider the story of abortion, because again, the facts of science are not friendly to the pro-abortion side. Consider some statistics. These are from the most recent statistics available are from 2020. Abortion is one of the most common surgical procedures in America. In 2020, abortion was performed every 34 seconds, 2,548 of them a day. Abortion is the leading cause of death in America, with heart disease being in a distant second place. Heart disease kills about 697,000 Americans a year, and abortion took 930,000 people in 2020. And since the Roe versus Wade decision, over 63 million people have lost their lives to abortion. The number of abortions every year had been trending down for a number of decades, actually. But in 2017, that reversed and the numbers started to climb again. 60% of women having abortions are in their 20s. 61% of women who have an abortion already have one or more children. That's something, maybe because I'm a man, I can't understand it, but they already have children. They know the miracle of birth, and yet they're still able to choose to abort a child. 85% of women who have an abortion are unmarried. 67% of women who have an abortion are economically disadvantaged. So it is a problem particularly for poorer people. 62% of women who have an abortion report a religious affiliation of some kind. Now, that tells me it's not just people outside the church having abortions, but to a degree, those inside as well. However, only 13% of those who reported to have a religious affiliation came from an evangelical Christian background. That's still 13% too many. So why do women have abortions? The most common reason women give for having an abortion are social reasons and economic reasons. According to the Guttmacher Institute, which does these surveys every few years, 74% of women who had an abortion said having a baby would dramatically change my life. In other words, it's an inconvenience. 73% of the women who had an abortion said, I can't afford a baby now. Apparently, adoption didn't occur to them as an option. 48% of women who had an abortion said, I don't want to be a single mother, or I'm having relationship problems. Again, a social reason. And 36% of the women who had an abortion say, I have enough children. Only 7% of the women that had an abortion said it was related to a health problem. And only 0.5% said it was because they were the victim of a rape or incest. And just so you know, we're also going to cover those issues of, because practically everybody says, I'm against abortion, except in the case of rape or incest, or to protect the life of the mother. But we're going to look at those issues as well. Why is it that Christians are so pro-life? Because we surely are. Well, I feel like we almost instinctively know that an unborn baby is still a baby, and that moving that child 8 inches down the birth canal does not convert it from a clump of cells into a living human being. I mean, even the notion of that is nonsense. And listening to people like Ben Shapiro, if you ever follow him or watch any of his videos on YouTube, listening to him ask pro-choice people, at what instant does a child become human? It's almost humorous if it wasn't so horrifying to realize what it is that they're discussing. Because that's a question that the pro-choice side can't answer, doesn't want to answer, doesn't want to be confronted with. At what moment does that clump of cells become a human? And they'll say, after they're born. So what changed in that 8-inch trip down the birth canal? Well, they can't answer that. It's a philosophy that they are forced to adopt because they want to support abortion at any time for any reason. So besides all the medical and the scientific evidence that we've looked at, we still have the clear teaching from the Bible that life begins at conception. Every human is made in the image of God. We believe that life begins in the womb at conception because, as I said, there's a new strand of DNA that has come into existence. It's not the mother's, it's not the father's. So our biblical rationale for life is that God created man in his own image, and the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Genesis 1:27. But one of the most definitive portions of Scripture on this issue of abortion is found in Psalms. Psalm 139, verses 13 to 16. And you've probably heard it before, but it says, For thou hast possessed my reins, which can be difficult to understand. But if you look up the words from the Hebrew, that phrase, possessed my reins, actually means you created my organs. That's actually what it means. Thou hast covered me. That phrase, very interesting. It means to weave together. It's talking about the formation of this child being weaved together. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. You have weaved me together while I was in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. He says, my substance, and the word there for substance actually means bones. I was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, which means a sheltered place, and curiously wrought. Again, that term, curiously wrought, means skillfully woven together. It's talking about the formation of a baby in a mother's womb. When I was curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, which is an interesting phrase because it's a phrase that was actually used to refer to the unseen womb of a woman, the lowest parts of the earth. It goes on, thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. That's not the word imperfect, unperfect, not complete. And the word golem directly refers to, is a word that directly was used to refer to a fetus. And in thy book all my members were written. In other words, the psalmist is saying, God formed every part of my body, which in continuance were fashioned. That word continuance there, it refers to all my days. In other words, it's saying, not only were all the members of my body written in your book, but all my days, all my time was already preordained and planned by God. Were fashioned or predetermined by God when as yet there was none of them. So the Bible's telling us here, before our first day of life, God has planned all our days. Before we were ever born, God already saw us as a person. God created us in the womb. God is the one who knit us together in the womb. That's why we are human. That's why we know that we are in fact created by God and possessed of a soul from the moment of conception in our mother's womb. Think about biblical justice. The Bible tells us, let love be without dissimulation. That means without pretense, without lies. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. That's Romans 12:9. So in Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court in effect made abortion on demand untouchable by law. Nobody but the Supreme Court could change that. The way it was done was actually in two steps. First, that landmark and unethical decision effectively said laws may not prevent abortion, even during the full 9 months, if the abortion, quote, is to preserve the life or health of the mother. But the second step of that case was to define health as, quote, all factors, physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and the woman's age relevant to the well-being of the patient. In other words, anything goes. Any reason that she would have for wanting to terminate the pregnancy was acceptable. So for almost 50 years, that meant that any perceived stress was a legal ground for eliminating the child. Christians are called to something higher. In fact, Amos 5:4 says, let justice roll down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. We desire a world and a culture where justice is preserved for everyone, including the unborn. Now, skeptics, they'll frequently say that, well, if there is a God, he's an evil God because he allows all this evil into our world. This kind of person typically says, well, a plane crashes and 30 people die and 20 people live. What kind of a God would arbitrarily choose some to live and some to die? Yet when people play God and determine whether a child within another's womb should live, they argue for that as a moral right. So when human beings are given the privilege of playing God, it's called a moral right. But when God acts as God, they call it an immoral act. What utter hypocrisy. What utter hypocrisy. Why do we have child protective services in our nation? It's because we are called to protect the lives of the defenseless. And that, for example, is one of the primary reasons for the existence of a police force. Shouldn't this same protection extend to a mother's womb? Psalm 82 verse 3 says, defend the poor and fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and the needy. So life begins at conception, not at birth. Look at what God said to Jeremiah the prophet. Jeremiah chapter 1 verse number 5. God said to Jeremiah, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations. Before he was ever born, God had already called Jeremiah to be a prophet. In Amos chapter 1, verse 13, God displays his righteous indignation against those who kill babies or fetuses in the womb. Amos 1:13 says, "Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have ripped up the women with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their border." They killed pregnant women. And God said, no forgiveness. No forgiveness to them. God will not hold them guiltless, nor will he let them go unpunished who kill the unborn. How much clearer can the scriptures be on this? This is not an opinion or my opinion. It's God Almighty's statement. So if it makes the pro-choice crowd mad, well, then they're getting mad at God himself. There is no justification for abortion in the Bible. And we're out of time, but I'll say quickly, and then we'll pick it up next week. There is forgiveness for those who have had an abortion, those who encourage others to have an abortion. There is forgiveness. There is no sin that God will not forgive, including the taking of a child's life. And we'll look into that more clearly next week. Let's have a word of prayer and we'll be finished.